A police dog froze in the middle of Terminal 2, then started barking, loud, sharp, and relentless, at a single traveler's bag. At first, passengers just stared. Security looked confused. The traveler smiled nervously, insisting it was a mistake. But the dog wouldn't stop. And when officers finally opened the luggage, what they found inside sent shockwaves through the entire terminal. This wasn't drugs. It wasn't contraband. It was something no one, not even federal agents, were prepared for. And it all started with one dog's refusal to look the other way. But before we get into what really happened that day, let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow we'll bring you another unbelievable story of courage, loyalty, and sacrifice from the world's most extraordinary K9 heroes. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow across the pre-dawn stillness of JFK International Airport's Terminal 2. Officer Sarah Delgado adjusted her duty belt, pulling her patrol jacket tighter against the early morning chill. At her side, her partner, Titan, a seasoned Belgian Malinois, stood alert, scanning the growing stream of travelers with the calm focus only years of training could teach. It was just before 6 a.m., the hour when international arrivals would start flooding in, the quiet before the storm. Sarah had worked this beat for nearly a decade, and she'd learned to trust her gut. And this morning, something felt off. She glanced at Titan. His ears flicked forward, nose twitching subtly. He was already working. They moved in sync, weaving through rolling luggage and sleepy passengers. Titan's paws were nearly silent against the polished floor, his sharp eyes flicking from bag to bag with clinical precision. "Morning, Delgado," called Officer Jameson from Security Post B. "Titan's looking sharp today." Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning just as carefully as her partner's. "Always is." Just then, they passed the luxury seating zone near Gate 8. That's when it started. Titan slowed, his posture shifted. It was barely perceptible, just a change. In weight, a slight adjustment of stance. But Sarah noticed immediately. Titan was onto something. And that's when he stopped cold, locked eyes on a sleek, custom-made suitcase sitting beside a sharply dressed man in his 30s. Titan's muscles tensed, his ears locked forward. Then, without warning, he began to bark. Not a training bark, not an alert bark, a warning. The barking echoed through the terminal, loud, sharp, insistent. Titan's entire body was locked in place, his eyes fixed on the sleek black suitcase. Officer Delgado's heart rate spiked, but her face remained calm. Only someone who knew Titan as well as she did would have caught the real signal. This wasn't a standard alert. This was different. She stepped forward, placing herself between Titan and the man beside the bag. "Sir," she said evenly, "I'm Officer Delgado with Airport Police. I'm going to need you to step aside with me for a moment." The man looked up, startled. Mid-30s, South Asian descent, neatly pressed charcoal suit, immaculate grooming, calm, but a little too calm. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Just a routine check," she replied, her voice flat, professional. "Your cooperation would be appreciated." He hesitated. His gaze flicked briefly to the exits. Then back to Titan. "I'm on a tight schedule," he said. "Business class to Dubai. My flight boards in less than an hour." Titan growled. Not a snarl, not a bark, just a deep, rising rumble. Delgado's breath caught. She'd heard that. Growl only twice before in her entire career, both times. It had led to something far worse than anyone expected. She keyed her radio. "Control, this is K9 Unit 12. I'm requesting backup to Terminal 2, Gate 8. Possible situation developing. Be advised, Titan is showing reactive posture." The man, Elias Rahim, according to the tag on his suitcase, shifted his weight subtly. Delgado saw the flicker of calculation in his eyes. A decision was forming. "Sir, please remain still," she ordered, her hand resting on the grip of her sidearm. But it was too late. In one swift motion, Elias grabbed his phone and hurled it toward her face, using the momentary distraction to shove the luggage cart toward Titan and sprint for the far side of the terminal. Delgado ducked. The phone missed her by inches. Titan dodged the tumbling suitcase like it was a training obstacle and gave chase immediately. "Stop! Airport police!" Sarah's voice rang out, firm and commanding, as she took off after him. Around them, the terminal exploded into chaos. Travelers screamed, scattered, ducked for cover. Phones came out, recording. Elias darted through the crowd with surprising speed, cutting sharply between security kiosks and luggage carts. But Titan was already ahead of him, taking a diagonal route to intercept. "Control, suspect fleeing east through Terminal 2, Delgado reported. "Male, charcoal suit, 5'10", early 30s. K9 in pursuit." Officer Jameson came into view at the end of the corridor, blocking Elias's path. He turned sharply and bolted into a maintenance hallway behind the customs desk. Titan followed without hesitation. Delgado was seconds behind, but just before she crossed the threshold, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Elias had something in his hand, a small rectangular device, and he'd just pressed a button. The moment Elias pressed that button, Officer Delgado knew they were dealing with more than a fleeing suspect. Her voice tightened as she keyed her mic. "Control, suspect may have activated a device. Possible remote trigger. Advise bomb squad and hazmat. We are pursuing through Maintenance Sector C." The sterile white lights of the terminal gave way to flickering fluorescence and concrete walls as they entered the narrow service corridors. Pipes hissed overhead. The air grew colder, sharper. Delgado could see her breath now. Titan's bark echoed off the hard walls, bouncing like sonar as they pushed deeper into the airport's hidden infrastructure. Then, crash. A stack of plastic storage bins toppled behind them, cutting off their exit. Elias had been busy during his brief head start. "You really should have let me leave, Officer Delgado," his voice called from somewhere ahead. Calm, cold, echoing. "Some questions are better left unasked." Delgado didn't respond. She moved forward carefully, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Titan low to the ground beside her, focused. She raised her voice. "Mr. Rahim, whatever you've activated, it's not worth dying over. Let's talk?" He laughed. "Talk? Like the way Officer Patel tried to talk 3 months ago? Singapore? Didn't go so well for him either, did it?" The name hit hard. Delgado remembered. The incident was buried quickly, an officer hospitalized after an alert from a highly trained K9, and then silence. The case had been sealed. Rumors suggested biohazards. Nothing confirmed. Titan suddenly stopped. His ears pricked forward, then back. He turned toward a utility room door, slightly ajar. Cold air bled from the gap. Delgado raised her weapon, approached slowly. Titan stood tense at her side, no longer tracking, now protecting. Inside the room, an industrial ventilation, fan-scattered maintenance tools, and sitting right in the middle, the suitcase. Its high-end leather exterior gleamed under the beam of her flashlight, but now its latches were pulsing with blue light. A faint hissing noise filled the air, barely audible over the hum of the airport's infrastructure. Titan growled, not at Elias, at the suitcase. Delgado didn't need more confirmation. "Control, this is K9 Unit 12. I've located the suspect device. I'm requesting immediate hazmat and EOD response. Potential airborne chemical threat. Repeat, this is not a drill." From behind a power panel, Elias stepped out. The corporate sheen was gone. His jacket hung open. His eyes flat and clinical. "You really don't understand, do you?" he said, almost disappointed. "That case is progress. Science. Evolution. He held up a small oxygen mask. You can chase me, or you can stop. That device. But you can't do both. Titan growled again, louder, more urgent. He stepped forward, placing himself between Delgado and the suitcase. She didn't hesitate. Titan. Guard. The dog moved like a bullet, lunging at Elias with trained precision. The mask flew from his hand as Titan took him down, jaws locking around his arm with just enough pressure to incapacitate. Delgado rushed to the suitcase. Up close, the design was terrifyingly advanced. Built-in containment chambers chemical dispersal. Vents A digital timer, counting down. Suspect in custody, she called into the radio, requesting immediate extraction. Titan is showing chemical detection behavior. Repeat, potential airborne toxin. Titan stood over Elias, unflinching, eyes still locked on the suitcase. Delgado could see it in his stance. They weren't safe. Yet, and deep down, she knew, this wasn't just an isolated threat. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Red and blue lights flooded the corridor as the hazmat team arrived in full gear, sensors already blaring before they reached the door. A CDC liaison and 2 federal agents followed close behind, voices clipped, controlled, but tense. The suitcase hadn't stopped hissing. Its latches now pulsed faster, the faint sound of internal mechanisms whirring just beneath the surface. Delgado stepped back as the tech team moved in, but her eyes never left the device, or Titan. He wasn't barking anymore. He was pacing, watching. Muscles tense. He knew something they didn't. The lead hazmat technician turned toward her, voice muffled behind the mask. This isn't a bomb. It's something worse. Airborne dispersal vector, heat-triggered. Delgado's stomach dropped. It wasn't just a threat to the terminal. If that suitcase had made it onto a plane, it could have endangered an entire international flight. Maybe more. She looked at Elias, still pinned under the watchful eye of Titan. He had stopped struggling. Now he just stared, calm, resigned, as if this had all been a test. 3 hours later, inside a sealed conference room near the airport's secure wing, Delgado sat at a steel table, Titan resting quietly at her feet. His ears flicked occasionally, tracking the footsteps of agents and officials moving in and out. Across from her sat Dr. Matthew Keller, senior virologist from the CDC. His expression was grim. "We've analyzed the substance," he said, sliding a sealed dossier across the table. "It's a synthetic pathogen, engineered, undetectable to standard scanning equipment. That dog," he paused, glancing down at Titan, "is the only reason we caught it." Delgado leaned back, heart pounding. "You're telling me Titan smelled something no machine can detect?" Dr. Keller nodded. "We've seen it before, once, maybe twice. The Seattle case, a warehouse in Belgium. But this is the first time we've been able to recover the dispersal system intact." Delgado stiffened. "The Seattle case, Officer Quinn's dog. That K9 never recovered." "Exactly," Keller said quietly. "Whatever's going on here, it's being tested, probed. Someone's pushing the limits of detection systems. Titan didn't just stop a chemical attack. He may have exposed an operation that's been running in the shadows for years." Delgado's mind reeled. The near miss in Detroit, the disappearing shipment in Belgium. Now this. Titan looked up at her, calm. Watching. Waiting. "How is it he can detect it?" she asked. Keller hesitated, then finally answered. "We pulled his records, his origin, the facility where he was rescued from. It wasn't just a shelter. It was an experimental lab, unofficial, off the books." He tapped the dossier. They were trying to enhance olfactory capacity in working dogs. It was shut down. Quietly. Most of the animals didn't survive, but Titan did. And now we know why. Delgado stared at her partner, who looked up at her, with those same intelligent eyes she'd seen the day they met. Suddenly, this wasn't about one dog or one case. It was about something much, much bigger. The fluorescent hum of the conference room faded into memory as Officer Delgado's thoughts drifted backward to the first day she met Titan. It had been nearly 2 years ago, late summer, Kentucky, the air heavy with heat and the scent of fresh cut grass. She was on medical leave, still limping from a botched raid that had left her previous partner, a golden retriever named Sarge, mortally wounded. She hadn't wanted another dog. Not then, not yet. The scars, physical and emotional, were still too raw, but her supervisor had insisted. "There's one you should meet," they said. "Not every handler can work with him, but you might be the exception." Delgado had expected a monster, but what she saw was something different. A Belgian Malinois with a rigid posture and dark, guarded eyes. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He just watched her. Curious, careful, waiting. His kennel file was thin, too thin. Rescued from a raid on an unlicensed lab in Eastern Europe. Rumors of chemical testing, neural conditioning, genetic tampering. The place had been wiped off the books before anyone could take formal action. Titan had been the only survivor. The trainer had warned her, "He doesn't trust anyone. He won't even approach unless he chooses to." So Delgado had simply kneeled outside his enclosure, resting her injured leg on the concrete floor, and waited. Minutes passed. Then, quietly, Titan stood, walked forward, pressed his head into her hand. The trainer's breath caught. "That's the first time he's ever done that," they whispered. "I think he sees something in you." From that day forward, they were a team. She didn't ask about what had been done to him, and he never flinched when her old injuries made her stumble. They healed together, her from grief, him from pain. And somewhere along the way, they became something more than just handler and K9. They became partners. Back in the conference room, Dr. Keller slid another file across the table. This one marked Confidential, National Security Threat Level, Red. Delgado opened it. Inside were photos, maps, classified manifests, cargo routes, diplomatic, shipments, names, countries, codes. Keller's voice was low but steady. This wasn't an isolated attempt. What you and Titan intercepted. It's part of something far bigger, coordinated, funded, hidden under layers of diplomatic immunity, and ghost shell companies. Delgado scanned a manifest, sealed crates, no inspections, transferred through high-risk transit hubs, Seattle, Detroit, Frankfurt, Dubai, all locations where elite K9 units had reported strange alerts, but found nothing, or more disturbingly, no longer remembered what they were chasing. Her breath caught. "They're testing response patterns," she whispered. "They're watching how we react to different threats, and learning how to hide from us." Keller nodded. "Exactly. And there's more." He tapped the dossier. "Your dog isn't just good. He's the key." Delgado looked down at Titan. Calm. Still. Steady. "What do you mean?" Keller exhaled. "There's a pattern. Every shipment he's reacted to, it's the same compound, same molecular signature. We didn't know it existed until now." He paused. "He can smell something that's literally off the radar." Delgado's voice dropped. "So they're weaponizing whatever was done to him?" "Not just him," Keller replied. "They're trying to replicate it, in more dogs, and eventually, in humans." The room went silent. Delgado stared at the evidence. A map showed over 30 unexplained chemical alerts, all dismissed due to lack of proof. Until now. She looked at Titan. He met her gaze, as always, quiet, knowing, resolute. "How far up does this go?" she asked. Keller hesitated. "We don't know. Yet. But the people who tried to disappear that suitcase? They're not finished. They'll come for him, and for you. Delgado stood. Then we stopped them first. The underground parking level beneath Terminal 2 was quiet. Too quiet. The concrete structure echoed with every boot step, every clipped order over the radio. The tension in the air was suffocating. Officer Delgado crouched behind a column beside Titan. Her vest was snug, her sidearm loaded. Titan's ears were perked, body low, perfectly still. Over her earpiece, Agent Torres's voice came through, tight and urgent. They're bringing him out now, diplomatic credentials in hand. If this goes wrong, we're starting an international incident. Delgado didn't respond. Her focus was on the service elevator directly ahead. Inside it, Elias Rahim, the suitcase, and a diplomatic security team claiming to represent a foreign consulate that hadn't existed on U.S. soil for over a decade. The cover story was already unraveling. But unless they found probable cause, they couldn't legally intervene, and Rahim knew it. The elevator dinged softly. The doors opened. He stepped out. His posture was restored. Suit pressed. Mask of civility back in place. Behind him, two men in tailored suits wheeled the suitcase on a reinforced cart. Titan's body tensed. "Target descending," said Torres. "Security team, 4 men. Elias confirmed. Suitcase in hand, no masks. They think they're walking. Away." Delgado glanced down. Titan's tail made a single twitch, then stilled. That was their signal. "Find," she whispered. Titan slipped into motion, silent, invisible in the rows of parked vehicles, tailing the group from the shadows. Delgado. "Watch from cover, her radio live. Come on, buddy. Show me something." Then, Titan stopped, tilted his head. Another subtle signal. There was a second device, hidden in the SUV. Delgado's voice cut through the silence. "Control! This is K9 Unit 12. Confirmed secondary chemical device located in their transport vehicle. Same signature as primary threat. Probable cause established." "Copy that," came Torres's voice. "All units, prepare to move." The team was halfway to the convoy when Titan froze again, this time staring at the suitcase. Delgado's heart skipped. The device had reactivated. "Chemical trigger just went live," she shouted. "Go, go, go!" Everything exploded at once. Federal. Agents surged from cover. Rahim lunged for the control panel on the case. One of his handlers reached for a weapon, shouting about diplomatic protection. But they were too slow. Titan launched forward, slamming into the man, pushing the cart and knocking him sideways, far enough to prevent contact with the suitcase. Delgado closed the distance in seconds, tackling Rahim just as he reached for the activation switch. The hazmat team swarmed in behind them, locking down the case with containment clamps, sensors screaming from chemical exposure. Rahim thrashed. Beneath her, fury finally breaking through his calm. "You don't understand," he spat. "This is bigger than your country, your laws. We're evolving the human race." Delgado pinned him harder. "By torturing dogs and weaponizing them?" "By experimenting until one of them survives long enough to be useful." She looked over at Titan, now guarding the SUV, holding the other men at bay with a single, low growl. "That one dog you didn't break just broke your whole operation." Rahim didn't answer. He knew it was over. Elias Rahim was led away in cuffs, his carefully crafted identity exposed, his diplomatic protections shattered by forged credentials and federal warrants. The suitcase, now sealed inside a triple-layer containment unit, was rushed into a mobile biohazard lab parked just outside the terminal. As the emergency lights faded and federal agents began wrapping up the scene, Officer Delgado knelt beside Titan. He stood perfectly still as she checked him over, his chest rising steady, alert, but calm. "Good boy," she whispered, forehead gently resting against his. Titan's tail gave a small wag, just one. Around them, the scope of the takedown was coming into view. Dozens of forged diplomatic crates were being pulled from multiple vehicles, each lined with similar dispersal systems. Custom-engineered compounds, controlled, targeted, invisible, to conventional detection. The operation spanned 3 continents. The damage they could have done, immeasurable. But now? Exposed. Stopped. Thanks to one K9 who refused to ignore what others couldn't even detect. Later that week, at a classified briefing in D.C., the full extent of the threat was laid bare. Federal agencies coordinated a sweeping investigation, raiding similar facilities across Europe and Asia. More dogs were found, some barely alive, others already lost. But a few, like Titan, had survived. And now, they were being given a second chance. At the center of it all, Delgado sat quietly, Titan by her side, as the Director of Homeland Security addressed the task. Force. His abilities may have come from science, the director said, looking down at Titan. But what he chose to do with them, that was pure loyalty. And when Titan received his commendation for valor, he stood tall and composed. He didn't wag his tail. Not yet. That came a moment later, when Officer Delgado knelt to hug him. 1 month later, Officer Delgado stood at her usual post near the international arrivals gate. Titan sat beside her, his newly earned medal catching the early morning sunlight. The crowds moved as they always did, hustling, hurrying, unaware of the storm they had narrowly escaped. But everything had changed. Security protocols across the country had been updated. Dozens of illegal testing operations had been shut down. And more importantly, Titan wasn't the only one saved. A recovery team had rescued over 40 dogs from the same kinds of labs that had nearly destroyed him. Some would be retrained, others retired into loving homes. The ripple effect of that one moment in Terminal 2 was still unfolding. Delgado looked down at her partner. He met her gaze, as always, calm, steady, waiting for the next command. That's when a little girl approached, clutching her mother's hand. "Can I pet him?" she asked shyly. Delgado smiled. "If he says it's okay." Titan's tail wagged. Once, slow, gentle, deliberate. The girl reached out, her small hand brushing his head. He leaned into her touch. "He's a hero," she said softly. Delgado's smile deepened. "Yes, he is. But more importantly," she knelt beside him, "he's my partner. Some bonds are forged in battle, others in grief. But the strongest are forged in trust, and sometimes the greatest heroes walk on 4 legs, with scars you'll never see and instincts that can save the world." If you were moved by Titan and Delgado's story, let us know in the comments. Have you ever witnessed the bond between a K9 and their handler? Do you believe animals can sense what we can't? Share your stories below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got more incredible K9 tales coming your way. Every dog has a story. Some change the world.